And welcome everyone to our Bleacher Report weekly bracket breakdown for the 2024 men's basketball NCAA tournament. I'm Andy Katz. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go region by region, look at a couple of teams that are on the bubble. We'll take your questions. We are doing this every Tuesday until Champ Week. So a couple more weeks as we get down to the wire here in mid to late February. So let's start out with our number one overall seeds, UConn, Purdue, Houston, and Arizona. The only tweak there from what the selection committee did on Saturday when we spoke to you from the top 16 reveal is we flipped UConn and Purdue, which I think the committee would have done after last weekend's results, where UConn crushed Marquette at home and then Purdue lost at Ohio State. They had a coaching change. So not a great loss for the Boilermakers, and I think they would have flipped them. So with that being said, we're going to go East versus West, Midwest versus South. So let's start in the East with UConn as the number one overall seed. And these were taken into the results through Monday night. So we had the Iowa State, Houston, and Virginia Tech results into these into our bracket here on Tuesday, February 20th. So UConn the one overall. Their 8-9 matchup, TCU, New Mexico. New Mexico with a monster game coming up on Wednesday, hosting Colorado State. TCU started to play better. Both those schools, I think, are going to be somewhere in the 7 to 10 range. I think that's the range. Here's Dayton as a 5. I still think Dayton could get to a 4 line, depending on what happens in the next couple weeks. South Florida, what a win that the Bulls had over FAU, on the weekend. So I've got South Florida here as a 12 seed, and you'll see later we have FAU as sort of the automatic qualifier out of the American. But here's USF. They're in first place in the American. Best wins that win over FAU. They won at North Texas. They won at Memphis. They had some bad losses early in the season. Payne, Hofstra, Central Michigan. They just got to keep winning. UTSA should get that one. SMU's playing really well. They destroyed Memphis. USF just has to keep winning. I think if they win the American outright, maybe another win over FAU in the tournament, or Memphis or Charlotte, who's playing really well, I think they get in. So we got them as a 12 right now. Illinois in the 4 versus 13 Appalachian State. Illinois now on that 4 line. We saw that with the top 16 reveal. I think Illinois can climb up to a 3. I don't know if they can get to a 2, but they can climb up to a 3. BYU, I think, is trending in the wrong direction as a 6. Here's Indiana State as an 11. They've lost a couple in a row since they were ranked. We have them as the AQ out of the Valley. Here's where it's dicey. 2 weeks ago, I would have said they could have gotten in on their own merit without winning the Valley Conference tournament. Drake obviously is playing well, but look what's happened. Lost to Bradley. Beat Bradley on the road, beat Drake, lost to Illinois State and at SIU. Those are 2 bad losses for Indiana State in their league. They have to keep winning. They got to win this league to have a chance to get in as an at-large. Alabama is your 3 versus Louisiana Tech. I think Alabama still could climb up to a 2. That's not out of the question. St. Mary's, Ole Miss. I think St. Mary's could climb up to a 5. We'll see if they can get there. They got to keep winning. But right now they feel a 7, based on their metrics. Ole Miss, holding on right there. Ole Miss still could slide out. I wouldn't be shocked if that were to happen. Kansas and Colgate. Kansas is the 2. Keep in mind, Kansas has wins over Houston and UConn. So they got 2 wins against the top line. That's what's holding Kansas as a 2 seed right now. I know I see the pushback. How can they be a 2? They're not even, within the first 2 spots of the Big 12 with Houston, Iowa State. This is a great example where the committee will look at the overall body of work. Can they hold the 2? We'll see. Could they slide to a 3? Sure. 4? Probably not. But that's why Kansas is where they are. So I just want you to keep that in mind. We got some questions that are coming in, but let's wait as they relate to the brackets. All right. So now we're going to go to the West bracket. All right. So let's move on to the West bracket, where the number 1 seed is Arizona. The fourth number 1 I'm sorry. I thought we were going to do West next. Because Midwest would not play East, because you'd have the top 2 seeds. So, all right, for these purposes, it's on your screen. We will do the Midwest right now, but you wouldn't have the number 1 seed UConn in a Final Four play the second number 1. They would match up in a potential championship game, not in a semifinal. So that's why it's different in that regard. But for these purposes, we're going to do this Midwest bracket. But you would not have the East versus the Midwest, because you'd have Purdue and UConn would be the top 2 teams. All right. So now, for these purposes, let's look at the Midwest. Purdue as the 1 seed. Okay. Washington State, FAU. I talked about FAU. I think they're trending in the wrong direction. Washington State is going in the right direction. They have a great game coming up where they can really move higher. They could win the Pac-12 if they get a sweep of Arizona. That game is in Tucson on Thursday, I think. So Kyle Smith, a National Coach of the Year candidate with what he's doing. But this would be, I think, a good little region for Purdue. Purdue they got to get out of this foursome, because if they get out of Indy into the Sweet 16 in Detroit, then the monkey is off their back to some degree. They're at least to the second weekend. Yes, I know they lost to St. Peter's 2 years ago, but I think if they get to the Sweet 16, they will feel some sense of relief. Clemson is a 5, lost at home to NC State. I know they were one of the last teams not to be on the 4 line, but I think that they will end up 5 or 6. Auburn is a 4 against Yale as a 13. Yale and Cornell play this week, the top 2 teams in the Ivy. Auburn got drilled at home by Kentucky. So I think Auburn is teetering on a 4-5 line. Utah State against the winner of A&M Gonzaga. Utah State, they could still go the wrong direction. They got a game coming up, with San Diego State, and we'll really know where they stand in the top of the Mountain West Conference. So here's A&M. They're a funny team. They got good wins: Tennessee, Florida, and Kentucky, all at home. Lost at Vandy, lost to LSU, lost at Arkansas. It's a big week coming up. Got to win your home games. See if they can play well against Tennessee. I'm on Gonzaga. I know they're not in every bracket, but look at the Zags here, because Gonzaga beat Kentucky on the road. The Yale one looks better. UCLA, despite losing to Utah the other day, they were in 3rd place. Prior to that, in the Pac-12, they slid a little with that loss, but that win's getting better. It's funny. We put on the screen here a worst loss. St. Mary's is not a bad loss, even though it was at home. At Santa Clara, yeah, that one stung. They got at Portland, and now you got to beat Santa Clara. You got to win all your home games, and they got to try to find a way to beat St. Mary's at McKean Pavilion later this month. Iowa State, High Point. We saw Iowa State against Houston on Monday night. I think if Iowa State had won that game, well, first of all, they would have been in first place in the Big 12. I think you could have made a strong argument for Iowa State to be on the 2 line. They still can get there. That would be a very tough game if it met where they met in the Elite 8 against Purdue. Iowa State's the kind of team that could take them out. Bottom part of the bracket, certainly Carolina could, because they've got size at every position. But Florida, Boise, Carolina, Morehead State, that's a good bracket for Carolina. I think Boise, with what they've done, and the same with Florida, I think they're going to be in. Florida probably is 6, 7, 8. Boise is 10, 11. So that's your Midwest. My thoughts on Carolina are they have Final Four potential with Bacot, Ingram, and R.J. Davis. No question about it. B. Robertson says, my thoughts on Purdue, they still can be Virginia of 18-19, losing to a 16 and 23 and winning it all in 24. They've got to close out games better. They got to make sure they don't get tight in those first 2 rounds. I don't think they'll get bounced early. I think they'll at least make it to the second weekend. I think they're going to get to the Final Four, but I got to see the bracket first. I think Iowa State could get there. They look really good. They play their tails off. If you watch that game against Houston, they're right there. Niner Empire. If that's a bracket for Carolina, they could definitely get to the Final Four. No question about it. Out of those first 2 brackets, if you're asking my dark horse Final Four pick, certainly Iowa State as a 3 wouldn't be a dark horse, but they could get out of this bracket to the Final Four. In this bracket, I would say your Final Four potential teams would be Purdue, Carolina, Iowa State. Really 1, 2, 3. I know that's not a big shocker. If we want to go back, if we can go back to the East for a second, I'll show who I think could get out of the Final Four, and I'll do that going forward. But certainly in the East, UConn can get there. Illinois can get there. Alabama can get there. And Kansas. That's 4. I like New Mexico's makeup, but not against UConn because of Klingon. If New Mexico ends up in another region, I could see them doing it. So that's where I see it. All right, so now let's go to, I believe, the West. Could be wrong. Let's see where we're going next here. All right, so we'll go to the West. So remember, the West would be in this scenario. If UConn is the one in the East and Arizona the one in the West, and they're the 4th one, those are the 2, 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3 of the ones. Because remember, the brackets aren't set until, in terms of who's playing who, until you have the 1 seeds. That's how they do it. So it could change week to week. Last week we had Purdue as 1 overall. So that last week it was Midwest versus West because of Purdue and Arizona. All right, so Arizona's the 1. It's a tenuous hold on it because if they lose to Washington State's not going to leap them, but Arizona may not hold the 1. But someone's got to come up and grab it. Is it someone from the SEC? Is it another Big 12 team? Virginia sliding the wrong direction as a 9. Same with Oklahoma. I think they're both trending the other way. Wisconsin off the 4 line from Saturday after losing the game. Really, they were right there to win against Rutgers. So they are now trending in the wrong direction. That would be a really hard game if that materialized, a 5-12 against Grand Canyon. Bad matchup for the Badgers. We'll see what happens. San Diego State, Vermont. So again, this is a bracket right here where San Diego State, they could get to the Elite 8. Arizona could, San Diego State can. At one point I thought Wisconsin. I don't believe that now. But in the top half, Arizona, San Diego State. Bottom half, South Carolina, lost couple, so that's why they're now a 6 against Cincinnati or Seton Hall. Let's take a look at Seton Hall. 5 quad 1 wins. Beat UConn, Marquette, won at Providence. Did lose to Villanova, Xavier on the road, USC at Butler. Seton Hall is on the right side of the bubble right now, and I think they will stay there. Bottom part here, Michigan State, Mississippi State, Marquette, Oakland. Marquette got drilled by UConn, but overall there too. Michigan State's trending in the right direction. I think they could get all the way up to a 5. Mississippi State, let's take a look at them. 3 quad 1 wins. Auburn, Tennessee, all at home. Washington State, all at home. Worst losses. Southern, at Georgia Tech, losing to Bama twice. You got to beat Ole Miss. You got to win at LSU. They're teetering. There are 10 I think could head the other way. On this list, on the bottom, Baylor, Michigan State, Marquette. So in this region, Arizona, San Diego State, Baylor, Michigan State, Marquette. 5 schools I think could get to the Final Four out of the West in this bracket. If Wisconsin starts to play the way they did a month ago, I'd add them and make it 6. So I would say that. Seton Hall should be a 8 or 7 seed. We'll see. They got a lot of work to do to get up that high. Yeah, Florida could be a dark horse, Dalton. I could see that. Again, on New Mexico, Wilhelm, I think that if the Lobos are in a different bracket, if they're away from UConn, they have a legit shot to make a deep run. All right, so our last bracket is the South, where we find Houston as the number 1 seed. As we saw at home against Iowa State, they can defend. They're tough. They can now score in a variety of ways. This team, I think, is going to hold a position as the 1 seed. Colorado State, Nebraska, that'd be a really good game. Good guard play in that game. I don't think either one can beat Houston, though, if that were to play out. Kentucky, McNeese, wow, that would be a wild affair if that materialized. And Kentucky, by the way, can get higher. Creighton, Akron, another really good game. There's a lot of potential upsets in that little subgroup. Texas Tech, Nevada, Duke, Charleston. Nevada's sort of holding on barely here. So they have 5 quad 1 wins, beat San Diego State, Colorado State. They won at Utah State. That was huge, huge. Lost to the Lobos twice, lost to Wyoming. Got to try to get the sweep of the Cowboys and win at San Jose. So it's a good week for Nevada to just hold their spot. Down on the bottom, Northwestern, Texas, Tennessee, Eastern Washington. So Northwestern, I think, is going to fall somewhere between 7 and 10. That win at Indiana was massive for them without Ty Berry. Texas, again, just holding on right here. Let's take a look at them. 4 quad 1 wins. Beat Baylor, won at OU and TCU. Those were huge wins for them. UCF did beat a couple people, but that was at home, so that wasn't great. Lost to West Virginia, that's okay. It's a road game. They're at Kansas. Don't expect them to win that, but shoot, if they do, it certainly will help their cause. I love Tennessee. Defensively, Dalton Connect's an All-American. Duke with Jared McCain and Kyle Filipkowski, that's a great 1-2 punch right now. So on this South region, Houston can get to the Final Four. Kentucky can. Creighton can. Duke can. And Tennessee. 5 teams out of the South certainly could get to the Final Four. So let's look at 2 schools that we didn't have here. And take a look at Butler, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Butler and then Kansas State. 4 quad 1 wins. Best wins at Marquette, at Creighton, Texas Tech. Lost to Seton Hall at home, lost to Providence, but they got at Villanova, they got at Seton Hall coming up. It's a hard schedule for Butler. Hard schedule. But it's in front of them to potentially create a path. K-State has had their moments with the home win over Kansas. That was by far their best win for Kansas State. Remember, they were in the Elite Eight. Great game against Michigan State. They lost to FAU in New York. Only 2 quad 1 wins. So beating Kansas and Baylor was huge for them. That's what's holding on. BYU at home, I mean, they got a lot of work to do. A lot of work. But in the Big 12, you got a lot of opportunities. And they're going to have opportunities in Kansas City at the Big 12 tournament. So I would not rule out K-State. They're in that group outside looking in right now. Yeah, Mod says Arizona would hate to see Wisconsin in the Sweet 16. Wisconsin beat Arizona twice in the Elite Eight. No limit rule. I think Duke can get there. McCain's playing. He was our player of the week. Certainly can. McChambers says the South would be the group of death. It's an insane bracket. It would be really tough. But, Houston can handle tough. Villanova is on the cusp right now. So this game against Butler is important for Villanova. It could be the second year in a row they miss out. We'll see. It could be. But that would be hard to swallow. No question about it. All right. So it is February 20th. We have a bracket on February 27th. We have a bracket on March 5th. And I would think we will do one more on March 12th. So more than likely, yes, that all makes sense. 3 more weeks of Tuesday brackets for you to digest, to challenge, to talk about over the next couple of weeks. Of course, every Monday, we break down the top 25. We've got 3 more weeks of that here on the Bleacher Report app. It's always repurposed on NCAA.com, on our men's basketball social handle, March Madness MBB. You can follow me, as you see on your screen, at the Andy Katz on Twitter X and the real Andy Katz on Instagram. Appreciate all of your engagement here, digesting it, repurposing it, and we'll talk to you again on Monday.